Greetings. Welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It's Saturday, January 18th, 2025, which means we're dealing with sports and humor today. Mostly sports, not so much humor. And by the way, this is sponsorship Saturday as well, so I'm having my Coke Zero. Not that I'm overtly seeking a sponsorship per se, but if you're watching, hmm. Anyway, what I want to focus on today is sports records, a measure of human excellence. What can an individual or a team accomplish in terms of athletics? It also, sports records gives us all this great information and this fodder to have these endless debates about who we think, either as a player, as a competitor, or for that matter, at the team level. Who do we think are the GOATs of all time? The GOATs, the greatest of all time. Again, whether that be at the individual level or at the team level. And you can think of it in a number of different ways. We think of goats as people like Tom Brady, for example, in football, the quarterback. Why do some think of him as the goat? Well, or at least among quarterbacks, he has 7 Super Bowl rings, so that's incomparable. He's passed for a NFL record almost 90,000 yards during the regular season. He has the record number 46 fourth quarter comebacks and a raft of other records as well. So a lot of people think of Tom Brady as the GOAT in that regard. Or you can think of, in hockey, think of Wayne Gretzky. Many define, in fact, his nickname was the Great One. So many think of him as as the GOAT, sorry, with his 2,857 career points. Second place, Jaromir Jagr, less than 2,000 points. What is it? 1,921. So by that metric, again, Gretzky stands head and shoulders above his nearest competitor. Although, if you look at his points per game average, Gretzky holds the NHL record at 1.92 points per game. But you know who's a very close second? Some of you do. Mario Lemieux at 1.88 points per game. That's a zero point zero 0.04 points per game difference. Now, the reason that Lemieux, of course, isn't up there with Gretzky in terms of total points and not ahead of Yager is because he played so many fewer games. That is, Lemieux played only 915 total games due to injuries, and his career was cut short, unfortunately. Or think in terms of individual sports, and I think of a couple of people in particular. So think of Michael Phelps, the swimmer, with his 23 golds in the Olympics. Second most golds in Olympics, held by a few different folks, 9. So again, think about that. Michael Phelps has more than 1.5 times as many Olympic gold medals as anybody else in any other sport. And in sort of a similar fashion, think of Simone Biles in gymnastics, that great U.S. gymnast. She has 23 golds in all world competitions. That extends, of course, beyond the Olympics. So she has 23 gymnastics golds at the world competition level. And her nearest competitor, Svetlana Korkina, also only has 9 by comparison. So that's why I compared Phelps and Biles in that regard. So they're arguably the goats, many would say, in the sports of swimming and gymnastics, respectively. Or if you dig further back in the history books, we could look at somebody like Cy Young, the great pitcher, for whom the Cy Young is named after, obviously. But why do we have an award named after him? Because of his unbelievable pitching record. He has 511 career wins. Nobody else is even close. Walter Johnson is in second place, but he's almost 100 wins behind Cy Young. And nobody else appears to be in the running or is going to come close to that record. Not in our lifetimes, perhaps, but who knows? I think a record that Cy Young holds that will never be broken. I think he has a few of them actually, but most remarkably, in my view, he has 700 or he had 749 complete games as a pitcher. 749 complete games. Nobody does that anymore. Your best pitchers and your most durable pitchers today may throw a handful of complete games in any given season, maybe a half dozen. In fact, only one person in the 21st century has hit double digits for a single season. And that was James Shields back in 2011 for Tampa when he had 11 complete games. So the game's changed, the philosophy's changed. We pull the pitchers. It's rare for them to stick around for full games. So that's a record that may never be, I don't imagine will ever be broken. Or you could look at records in other terms, other kinds of outstanding achievements, especially at the career level. Think of Bill Russell's 11 NBA championships in 13 seasons. That may never be accomplished again. Or think of the undefeated boxers like Floyd Mayweather Jr. at 50 and 0, or Rocky Marciano at 49 and 0. Again, some think of Muhammad Ali as the greatest of all time, and he used to tout himself that way as well. So we used to have a lot of fun with it. But in terms of pure records, you can't argue with perfection. Mayweather and Marciano are, have those unblemished records. So anyway, there are different types of excellent performances. We can look at excellence in terms of, the one of the challenges is there's such diversity in sports itself, and in the nature and the kinds of sports, that it's a challenge to compare the apples to the oranges to the bananas and so forth. And so, for example, if I were to say to you, what do you think about Ian Miller? Is he the greatest in equestrian? So, well, I don't know anything about equestrian. Well, what if I told you that Ian Miller went to 10 consecutive Olympics? That's right. Ian Miller for Canada competed in 10 consecutive Olympics from the age 25 to age 65. That's quite impressive, no? Maybe until you learn that, on the other hand, he only won one Olympic medal. He won one silver out of those 10 appearances. In contrast, look at somebody like Richard Petty, the race car driver. Petty won 200 NASCAR races in his career. So is that good? How good is that? How do you know? Well, if you don't follow racing, if you don't know the statistics, difficult to say. What you should know, though, is that that's almost twice as many as his nearest competitor, David Pearson, who finished his career with 105 NASCAR victories. So, yeah, most would argue that Petty must be the GOAT then, based on his phenomenal number of career wins in NASCAR. Okay? So, crucially, then, you also have to consider the time frame. Are we talking about a single performance, a single competition, a single game? Or are we talking about a season average or season performance? Or, as a number of the instances that I've shared with you, are we talking about career figures, career records? Okay. So you'll find fascinating information on all counts, depending upon what you're interested in. So I just want to spend the last couple of minutes talking about what I think of as the single greatest individual performances and records. Not the Miami Dolphins team record of 17 and 0 in 1972, so that stands unmatched. But I'm talking about an individual and their performance with respect to a specific game or match or competition. Okay? That's all. And then I think about this oftentimes in terms of what's the percentage improvement or how far ahead do they stand compared to their nearest competitor. And so when I think of somebody shattering a gold record or establishing a world standard at the individual level, I think, well, how great is that record? Well, in my view, in many respects, it depends on how close or how far above or how far beyond did they go compared to the previous record or other competitors in their sports. So let me be a little bit more specific or give you an example. So I think of Usain Bolt as being the greatest sprinter of all time. And I think of that based on the fact that he's the only sprinter to have won the 100 meters and the 200-meter sprints in three consecutive Olympics in 2008, 12, and 16. So he holds that particular record. He also still holds, as of January 2025, the world records in the 100 and 200 meters. So, again, in my book, Bolt's the GOAT of sprinting. However, uh, I think my argument would be that the single greatest athletic performance in terms of track and field goes to Bob Beamon and his long jump in the Olympic finals back on October 18th of 1968. He jumped an otherworldly 8.9 meters. That also translates into 29 feet, 2.25 inches. That shattered the previous world record by almost 2 feet. The previous record was 27 feet, 4.5 inches, or 8.35 meters, shared by Ralph Boston and Ter Ovanesyan, the Russian. And just as impressively, in my view, that translated into an overall improvement upon the previous record of about 6.6%. That's almost unheard of. Rarely do you see a world record or world standard established in track and field where the competitor breaks the record by more than 1 or 2 or at most 3%. But Beeman, 6.6% with that one jump. He was the first athlete ever to jump over 27 feet 6 inches. He was the first athlete to jump over 28 feet. And in that same jump, of course, the first to jump over 29 feet. And as a result of that incredible performance, in sports jargon, a new adjective was invented to describe a spectacular feat. We say that it was Beeman-esque after Bob Beeman. Okay, so and then in basketball, I'd have to give the single game performance to Wilt Chamberlain. Many of you know he scored 100 points in one game back on March 2nd of 1962. Remembered fondly in the Heaton household, my friend, because Alan Heaton was born on March 2nd. But most of the world wasn't concerned about Alan. They were impressed more with Wilt Chamberlain's performance that evening. By the way, Chamberlain broke his own record. He had held the scoring record, the single game scoring record, which he had established 3 months earlier, roughly, when he scored 78 points in triple overtime in one game. So, again, and then actually the number two game of all time now belongs to Kobe Bryant, who scored 81 points in the mid 2000s against my beloved Toronto Raptors. So, what's my point in all of this? Well, if you look at Chamberlain's 100-point game, again, nobody's really come close. Even Kobe Bryant's 81 points, that's still 23.5% short of Chamberlain's record. So that's why it stands out to me as the single greatest individual performance of all time in NBA basketball history. Okay. By the way, if you look at his season, and again, I know I'm focusing more on the individual, but it's just kind of fun to reminisce that that season, Chamberlain averaged 50.4 points per game. And in fact, Chamberlain has the top three season averages in scoring of all time. His second average, his second highest average was the next year at 44.8. So think of those two seasons. But the next closest player in terms of an overall season average is Elgin Baylor, who at his best averaged 38.4, same year that Chamberlain averaged 50.4. But my point here is that Chamberlain's average is still 31% better, just over, compared to Baylor's uh, record, or his average. So again, there's really no comparison. Fun fact, if Chamberlain had retired by age 30, like Jim Brown, the great football player, uh, his career averages would have been 39 points per game and 24.6 rebounds per game. Again, these are uh, unimaginable numbers in this day and age. In football, there's been so many great games and so many people that you could highlight on both offense and defense. I'm not going to do a deep dive into that today, but I just want to point out one spectacular performance that I think stands out, and that is Don Hutson, the receiver. Don Hutson's record of 29 points by himself in one quarter. of play. I know that's not a whole game, so I'm cheating a little bit, but I thought again, I find that phenomenal. So he had 4 touchdowns and 5 extra points, 29 points in the second quarter of a football game at the pro level. So that to me kind of stands out. The only thing comparable would be Tom Brady's 5 touchdown passes. So he threw for 5 touchdowns in one quarter against the Tennessee Titans back on October 18th of 2009. So again, we can look at football in greater depth another time, and there's so much to look in. And then in baseball, I mentioned I'd like to highlight a recent event and a game that, for my money, arguably stands out as the single greatest offensive performance in baseball history, in Major League Baseball, that is. And this occurred just last year on September 19th of 2024. What am I talking about? Shohei Ohtani's unbelievable game where he reached, for the first time ever in MLB history, 50 home runs and 50 steals in a single season. So he's the inaugural member of the 50-50 club. That is 50 or more homers and 50 or more steals in one single season. But for that particular game, I find even more impressive. So, what did Ohtani do in that game? What makes this, in my opinion, the greatest single athletic performance in baseball history? Well, he went 6 for 6 batting, and of those 6 hits, 3 he hit for home runs. He drove in 10 runs, 10 RBIs, and he stole 2 bases. I don't know of a stat line comparable to that. Oh, and by the way, in that particular game and with that win, his team clinched, the LA Dodgers clinched a playoff spot, postseason spot. I don't know how you can get any better than that. Well, you can, obviously, statistically, but it's going to be hard to beat that particular single game performance. So, and by the way, um, no other player in baseball history had hit 3 homers and stolen multiple bases in a single game until Ohtani did that. And similarly, his total of 17 bases is the most ever in a multi-steal game, smashing the previous mark of 11 held by Kirk Gibson and Brago Roth. So again, Ohtani's game from last September is just amazing. And then for the NHL, I want to highlight the single game scoring record of Darryl Sittler. This dates back to February 7th of 1976. Sittler played for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he scored a still standing record of 10 points in one game. He had 4 goals and tallied 6 assists for 10 points. Now, how good is that? Well, I guess it's all relative. There have been a few other players who have scored 8 points in a single game. Incredibly impressive, too. But if you look at my statistical metric, that 10 points does still stand, in fact, 25% above the other players in second place with their 8 point games. So that's pretty remarkable. Okay, so there's a lot more that we can say about sports and about records, and we will be saying that. And again, I've only looked at a few of the individual records. I also want to do a deeper dive into individual performances as well as team records down the road. Um, okay, and again, we can look at both individual competitions, but also look at seasons and look at careers, all of which we will do in due time. So for now, though, thanks for stopping by. I hope this was fun and interesting. And until we meet again, perhaps tomorrow, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives and nurture love in your hearts. Take care.